awesome Nintendo Switch 2 news just dropped. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we have much to discuss regarding Nintendo and the Switch 2. We have new footage for Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bananza. We have even more features that have been shown off for Switch 2. We've also seen that Switch 2s are out there in the wild, and we also have a few different rumors on some big games coming to the console, improved power down the road, and the Nintendo Direct that a lot of us are expecting to see in this upcoming month of June. And there's even more to discuss today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out I am now aiming for a new goal of 60,000 subscribers. So if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So today on the Nintendo Today app, Nintendo showed off some different features for the Nintendo 64 Nintendo Classics application. And the three features they showed off are Rewind, CRT Filter, and View Change Controls. Rewind and CRT Filter are exclusive Switch 2 features. So Rewind is actually something already available on Switch 1 for the different Nintendo apps like NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, but not the N64 app. On Switch 2, you can rewind your games up to a certain extent. And they also showed off the CRT filter with Kirby Crystal Shards. As you see, it really helps to give you this nostalgic vibe, reminds you of how it used to work back in the day, which is very much appreciated. But what I think may be totally new information here is that the View Change Controls feature is not just for Switch 2 Nintendo Classics, but also for Switch 1. So you can customize controls on a per game basis on the Nintendo Classics app, which I think is actually a very big deal. You look at games like Killer Instinct, for example, or pretty much any N64 game, because the N64 controller had such different controls compared to all other controllers out there, it's hard to get a good feel of these games with the Switch controls or the Switch 2 controls, but with this customization option, we're going to be able to make it a lot more comfortable. And on a per game basis, right? So yes, you can customize your Switch controls on a console basis, but on a per game basis, different games play in different ways, so this matters a great deal. So I'm looking forward to enjoying Nintendo Classics on my Switch 2 in just a few days. Next week, the Switch 2 is coming out. I'm recording this on a Tuesday, the console launches on Thursday next week. We are less than 9 days away, and that is extremely exciting. Now, Switch 2s, given that this console is indeed coming out next week, are now in stores in a lot of different places, and we're seeing different photos pop up, like as you see here, or as you see here. There are literally Switch 2s out on store shelves. This is crazy. Look at Mario Kart World, it's beautiful. Even the Tears of the Kingdom Switch 2 edition, it looks great. It's just so exciting to see photos of these consoles out there on shelves. It looks awesome, it's exciting. You can see they have them in cages here. There's footage of them out there, and yeah, this is just a box someone is holding here, right? It's not the actual Switch 2 in the box, but they're out there. Stores are getting ready. This console is coming out so soon. Now, I do want to speak on one particular point that a lot of people have been mentioning as of late, and that's that the Switch 2 box looks very similar to the Switch 1 OLED box. And some people are concerned that this might be an issue for consumers in understanding what to buy. I don't think it's going to be an issue. The reason why I don't think it's going to be an issue is because, well, yes, the 2 was clearly there, and more than once, but as we've seen from other angles, it's not just the front. The other sides of the boxes look quite different, right? Like you have this side right here where you can see people playing in tabletop mode. Most people are going to be buying the Mario Kart World bundle, and so the simple fact that Mario Kart World is also on there helps to further differentiate the box. We've also seen the other sides as well where there's someone playing the Switch 2 on a field, and 2 is all over the box. It's on one side, it's on another, it's multiple times here in the front, it's on the back as well. Like, I don't think this is going to be a major concern. I think it's very clear this is a Switch 2. And something else I like to point out about this is that the way these things are bought are going to help with the clarity. You look at iPhones. iPhone boxes look so similar, and they update every single year. It's way easier to confuse an iPhone than it would be a Switch 1 from a Switch 2. And yet, we don't really hear too many people complaining about this issue. And part of that is because when you pick up an iPhone, you can't just go to a store shelf and take it to a register. No, it's usually locked behind something, it's hidden in a back room, and you have to ask for it. And very similarly, with the Switch 2, while you may see it out there, it's usually going to be locked behind some kind of cage or cabinet or behind some sort of cash register where you will have to ask for it. So it will be very hard to ask for a Switch 2 and get a Switch 1. Like, I just think that's very unlikely. So personally, I think people are kind of doom-mongering here when they're saying that, oh, this looks way too much like a Switch 1 OLED, everyone's going to get confused and everyone's going to buy a Switch 1 OLED. I don't think this is anything like that. I don't think this is anything like the Xbox One X, Xbox Series X situation where a whole bunch of people were buying the Xbox One X when the Xbox Series X was announced. I don't think this is anything like that. I think Nintendo was very smart about their branding and marketing here. No, I do not think they should have done away with the red to further differentiate the console. Red is the color brand of Nintendo. So this is the right way to go about it. I think it's going to be totally, absolutely fine. In other news, we have heard that Costco has some interesting pricing for Switch 2 products. The Switch 2 Pro Controller is $74.99, the Switch 2 console, $524.99, but this includes Mario Kart World digitally and a whole year of Nintendo Online plus expansion pack, so you actually can save $25 here. And Donkey Kong Bananza, as opposed to $70, is being sold for $62.99. And also, by the way, on day one, you can just walk into a Costco to buy the Switch 2. So if you don't have a pre-order, if you get there early, you might be able to pick one up. But let's now move on to the new footage we've gotten for Mario Kart World. Take a look. So as you see from this footage, Nintendo's showing off another mission, so even more variety to the missions, where you have to show off your wall riding skills. And I think missions like this are really great to help teach you how to play the game and understand the different mechanics and how to explore around the world. And we've seen this with the different missions. It seems like it's a lot about training and pushing your skills in this game. But we also saw another P-Switch mission just a few days ago where they showed you a Shy Guy racing along with other Shy Guys. You actually would join them in the race, this snowboarding competition, which I really appreciate. It shows the missions, yes, even more variety to the missions, but also that some of the missions tie into what's going on with the world. It's not just random challenges, but it's sometimes building off of what's already going on in the environment, which I think will further help to immerse us into this world. And I'll also point out a bit more footage where we see the Wiggler go into binocular view here. And just one thing I saw that was worthy of note is that we see another location for Nabbit. And I'm really wondering if there's something going on with Nabbit here. I'm looking forward to exploring Mario Kart World and seeing if there's anything to do with Nabbit in these different locations. And then we also got new footage for Donkey Kong Bananza. Take a look. So as you see with this footage, it's showing off the hand slap mechanic, it's showing you how to use it and how it's beneficial to find different objects hidden throughout the environment. But what I think is especially interesting about this footage is the music we hear. It's very distinct, it sounds almost a little bit like Splatoon, but it still has those Monkey and Kong sounds as well, so it still feels Donkey Kong, but it's very different from anything else we've heard before. And I think it goes to show the variety of music we're going to be able to hear throughout this game, which helps to strengthen the notion that music is still very important in Donkey Kong, even with Bananza. Now we also got some interesting news on the camera field of view options for Gamechat. So as you see here, there are three different options. There's default view, where the camera just captures you on camera with your room in the background. As you see, this is how it would look during normal Gamechat. But there's also the no background option, where it cleans out the background for you, as you see here. That's fine, we've seen that before as well. But there's also only the face option, where it just shows your face and not your entire upper half or whatever is on camera. So there's three different options there, kind of nice that we have these options for Gamechat. Personally, I'm not too excited for the camera, but maybe I'll eventually give it a whirl. I'm just happy that Nintendo has some form of dedicated voice chat, and they're actually going the extra mile here with Gamechat. Which actually brings me to the first rumor we're going to be discussing today. So, a few days ago, some of you may have heard that Digital Foundry got word of the official specs of Switch 2, like the clock speeds and such, and they reported that the operating system actually takes up 3 gigabytes of the total 12 gigabytes of RAM the Switch 2 has. And it's assumed that Gamechat takes up a lot of these resources here, which makes sense. Gamechat seems to be a fairly significant feature. However, we've heard a rumor from Madigan on Famiboards, who seems to have a fair bit of a strong following on this forum. I've heard the goal is to get it down to 2 gigabytes and 1 core, but no idea when or if that will be accomplished. More resources have been released since the earlier dev environment though, and I expect that to continue. So assuming this rumor is true, it's a rumor, take it with a grain of salt, this would mean that Nintendo is trying to optimize the Switch 2, and hopefully eventually there will be a whole extra gigabyte of RAM available for gameplay use. And really I don't think this should be too surprising, because we've seen Nintendo and other game companies like Sony and Microsoft optimize their consoles throughout the life of the system. With Switch 1 for example, Nintendo allowed developers to use even higher clock speeds, so perhaps eventually for Switch 2 we will have access to even higher clock speeds, and also more RAM will be dedicated to the gameplay experience as they further optimize the operating system. But also we have heard from Nash Weedle that Nvidia is looking to improve DLSS on Switch 2 as well. There may be a big update there. So there's actually a lot of reason to believe that games will continue to look and run better as the generation progresses, which is already a thing we've come to expect even without these updates, because developers further learn how to take better advantage of the console as time progresses. But on the note of Nash Weedle, he put out another leak express, as it reads here, a leak express. Puedo confirmar que se está trabajando en un port de Lies of P para Switch 2. Su anuncio parece que podría hacerse en junio, pero depende de algunos factores del desarrollo del port, ya que quieren mostrarlo con fecha de lanzamiento. So it looks like, according to Nash Weedle, Lies of P, this Souls-like game, a very good one, is going to be coming to Switch 2, and they are aiming to announce it in June, and they would also like to show it off with a launch date as well. And Deco Felipe from Universal Nintendo also seems to be able to corroborate this information. So that's 2 different people with apparent inside sources that are saying that Lies of P is coming to Nintendo Switch 2, a very good game. So hopefully this turns out to be true, and it may be one of the games we see in the expected June Nintendo Direct. Which brings us to our next rumor here. So, a few days ago, we talked about how journalist Pedro Henrique Lutelipe, also known as Page Brazil, said they had heard there would be a Nintendo Direct in either the launch week of Switch 2, so next week, or the week afterwards. Well, Nintendo is now saying, another source, that they've heard something similar. So we now have 2 different sources indicating that a Nintendo Direct is happening soon. I personally think it's unlikely there will be a normal sort of big general direct about Switch 2 next week. I don't think that's going to happen. It's the launch week of Switch 2. There's going to be a lot dedicated to marketing the console, branding it, making sure everything gets out there appropriately. There's going to be reviews and previews and impressions and all that stuff. And then immediately after the launch of Switch 2 on June 5th, on June 6th is Summer Games Fest, where we're going to be seeing a lot of different third-party games being announced across for the entire industry, but also including Switch 2 over the course of the weekend. So to me, it just kind of feels like it's not a good time to put out the Direct, but next week, or rather I mean the week after the launch of Switch 2, which still factors into what's being said about the timing of this rumor, I think is far more believable. But of course, take this all with a grain of salt. Historically speaking, Directs always happen in June pretty much, and lately the Directs have been happening later into the month of June, not earlier. So my expectation is later, but hopefully we do see it sooner, as these rumors are suggesting. Moving on from these rumors though, we have another comparison of Cyberpunk 2077 on Switch 2 in comparison to Xbox Series S. And as you see from this single comparison shot here from Digital Foundry, it looks like the Switch 2 version compared to Series S looks sharper. It's not as fuzzy or blurry. We can get a better look at the backgrounds and the overall details. It's not super substantial, but it is evident, and I think that's important. It goes to show that the Switch 2 is in the ballpark of Series S. There are cases where it may look and run a little bit better, and there are cases where it may not. But this is one of those cases, at least from this screenshot here, where it does look better, and I think that's a big deal, because if Switch 2 can already punch around this weight, then that means a variety of third-party games that are accessible on Series S likely can also come to Switch 2. And if Nintendo does optimize the operating system, offering more RAM, we do see an improvement to DLSS. If even higher clock speeds are made available to developers, and developers just continually figure out more and more ways to take better advantage of the hardware, we're going to see more and more games be possible on Switch 2 and looking and running better as time progresses. And that's exciting. Wrapping things up here, here's a few more interesting little news updates. Hellblade: Senua's Saga is getting a physical release on Switch 1 from Limited Run Games according to this ESRB rating that's just been discovered. We also have learned that Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake is actually getting a Switch 2 version, but unfortunately it's only going to be a game keycard, meaning that when you put the game keycard into your Switch 2, it will grant you the right to download the game onto your console. If you take it out and put it in another console, you can download it onto that console, but it only works when the game keycard is in there. A lot of people don't like this because they would prefer to have their games literally on the cartridge, so maybe you might prefer getting the Switch 1 version. It has not been announced what sort of improvements we may see in the Switch 2 version, or if there will be some sort of free upgrade or paid upgrade option if you have the Switch 1 version, so do keep that in mind. But at least we do have a few options here in terms of getting this game. And finally, Nintendo has updated their backwards compatibility for Switch 2. So as you see here from this list, almost every single Nintendo game is fully backwards compatible on Switch 2. There is a small percentage that aren't, as you see with this small red line here. And then for third-party games, partner games, there's over 15,000 that are compatible. This dark blue is all games that work perfectly normal. The light blue, there are some small issues, but still you can see the majority of games, a super majority, work just fine. And they are working on getting even more to work on the console. However, we have learned that some software apps like Crunchyroll, Hulu will not be working on Switch 2 from Switch 1. Will there be a dedicated Switch 2 version of these apps eventually? I assume yes. We haven't heard about it yet, so I assume also not day one, but I would think at some point down the road, these will be added. We have learned that there have been some titles that have seen improvements or updates for Switch 2 backwards compatibility, such as Doom Eternal. That's great news. Also, we have learned that there are other games that have yet to receive these updates, like Alien Isolation, so hopefully we see an update for that in the not so distant future. This is something that Nintendo's continually working on, but as I just showed you, most games are already fully backwards compatible, and they are continually working on it to make more and more games fully compatible on Switch 2 with no issues. But that wraps up all the Nintendo Switch 2 news for today. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.